Good morning. We start a new sermon series today. The sermon series is Everybody Welcome, and it looks at how we welcome people in different circumstances. Today's theme is Including All in the Harvest, and our scripture is Matthew 9:35 through 38. Jesus traveled among all the cities and villages, teaching in their synagogues, announcing the good news of the kingdom, and healing every disease and every sickness. Now when Jesus saw the crowds, he had compassion for them because they were troubled and helpless, like sheep without a shepherd. Then he said to his disciples, "The size of the harvest is bigger than you can imagine, but there are few workers. Therefore, plead with the Lord of the harvest to send out workers for his harvest." I think that there are several different themes here, and we'll kind of unpack this a little bit at a time. Starts out, Jesus traveled among all the cities and villages, teaching in their synagogues and announcing the good news and healing every disease and sickness. In some of the older translations, instead of announcing the good news, they use the word heralding. And in the medieval times, every king had a herald, or more than one herald, who would go throughout the countryside, and that was the way they communicated. Didn't have newspapers, didn't have smartphones, Facebook or Instagram or anything like that. To communicate, the message would be given to the herald, and the herald would go out and proclaim that news. And that is the role. You can see that role here, that Jesus has been sent out, and he's been sent out by God to proclaim the good news, that what God has done in and through him. He's teaching, but his teaching is not just, as we see sometimes, and we've talked about recently, where he would sit down and gather the students around him, his disciples. His teaching also had a form of action to it. It wasn't do as I say as much as do as I do. And his actions were also a form of teaching there. And healing. That he was healing every disease and every sickness. I think that healer is one aspect of being a disciple of Christ that we have the most trouble with, that seeing ourselves in the role of a healer. But I would say that in response to that there is a healing aspect of your physical presence that can't be discounted. In other words, there's healing that takes place in people's lives just by the fact that you're there with them. Not that you do anything, not that you say anything, just the fact that you were there at a time that they needed them. I can testify to this, and I'm not saying this to toot my own horn or anything. It's just sort of the way that I felt led as a pastor. And I have a thank you note that was written to me by a lady in the first church that I served. She had just given birth, and there were some complications of the birth. Her family lived in Big Island, and it was time for them to get back home. And I simply stayed there in the hospital. Only lived right down the street, like, a half a mile.
What hospital?
Bedford.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah, that we were living in the North Hills subdivision in a parsonage at that time. So I stayed there with Janet as to just somebody to be with her, to give their family a peace of mind. And Janet wrote me a thank you note thanking me for all that I'd done. And literally all that I did was sit there in the room, and I wasn't even sure until she sent me that thank you note that she was even aware that I was there. But I was doing it more for her sister and mother than I was for her, to give them some peace of mind. So presence is a form of healing that I think we discount. In the next verse, he says, "Now when Jesus saw the crowds, he had compassion for them because they were troubled and helpless like sheep without a shepherd." He had compassion. He saw the crowds. These were the ordinary people, and Jesus' actions here, the fact that he had compassion for them, it stands in stark contrast to the religious leaders, the scribes and Pharisees, the priests of that day. There was no compassion. They simply said, "This is the law. This is what you have to do. If you don't do it, you're not welcome." And Jesus' response to them is to show them that he cares about them and that he understands their plight, that he understands their pain, their hunger, their loneliness, their bewilderment. And as I said, the Jewish leaders were in contrast to that in not having compassion, but saying, you got to hold the law up here. If you don't, there's no place for you. And then in the last two verses, then he said to his disciples, "The size of the harvest is bigger than you can imagine, but there are few workers. Therefore plead with the Lord of the harvest to send out workers for his harvest." And Jesus is not leaving it there. Matthew in his gospel goes on in chapter 10. You have the sending out of the disciples, that he tells them what they're to do, and he commissions them to go out and literally to go out and harvest. Sends them out two by two. And they come back in amazement at what they had seen in response to their faithfulness. Great, the great is the harvest, and there are few workers. As I was looking at this, the thoughts that were running through my mind is the decline of the mainline denominations across the board. The mainline Christian denominations have had a steady decline over the last 40 to 50 years. At the same time, in the United States, we have a census that asks the question of your spiritual affiliation. And one of the approved answers is none. And the number of people that are putting on the census that they have no spiritual affiliation, the ones that are checking the none blocks, has steadily increased. So you have a decline of the mainline denominations in their membership. You have an increase in the number of people who are saying that they have no affiliation, religious affiliation. In the corporate world, they refer to such a graft as the Jaws graft. But their way of defining it, this would be the expenses and this would be the income. And after they cross paths here, you're spending more than you're making money. In this case, there are more people who could become followers of Christ than there are people to spread the good news there. So I always think about that Jaws chart there whenever I see this. So the harvest is bigger than we can imagine, and unfortunately is growing. There are two other thoughts that came to my mind as I was pondering this. There was a film, I guess it's going back, time flies, it doesn't seem possible, but this is going back at least 20 years and maybe 30 years ago. There was a film called Pay It Forward. And the film was based on a book by the same name. And the premise of the story was that a junior high school class had been given an assignment to come up with a way that they could impact people in their community. And this boy came up with this idea of paying it forward. And he had a graph and charts to back up his reasoning here. And his reasoning was that if he could impact the lives of two people and convince them to likewise, each one of them to impact two other people. And he showed with a graph how that continued to spread out. It's a reverse pyramid type of thing, that you start small and it keeps getting bigger and bigger as it goes out. And the number of people that would have been impacted by that young boy's efforts. And he didn't just do this, theoretically. He actually went out and tried to do something for people in his community. Time has taken away what it was he actually did. I just remember that he did do something for people in his community. And that stands aside one of our former bishops, Bishop Joe Pennell. During the statisticians' report at annual conference one year, the report had been the same year after year, but nobody had ever said anything about it. And while he was bishop one year, somebody rose and asked to be recognized after the statistician gave their report. And he wanted to reflect on one particular point in the statistician's report, and that was the number of people who had made a profession of faith since the last annual conference. And specifically, he wanted to know, and I don't believe this was broken out in the chart at that time, he wanted to know how many churches had not had at least one profession of faith during the past year. And this came back the next year, and they discovered, and I forget the percentage, it was well over 50% of the churches that had not had any professions of faith in the last year. And so he challenged the conference, that he challenged them for every church to have just one profession of faith. In other words, bring one person to making a statement that they profess Jesus Christ as Lord and Savior, one person in the year to the next annual conference. And he went on, after challenging the conference, that he said that I guarantee you that if you adopt this, that our membership decline will stop and we will start to increase in membership. And he was absolutely on the money. And for the rest of his term as bishop, when he made this the hallmark of his residency here in Virginia, the membership in the Virginia Annual Conference started to increase. It wasn't dramatic, but it was not declining significantly. It was not declining each year. And sadly, since that focus has gone away, and you could make the argument that COVID entered into that and impacted it too, but without that emphasis, we've gone back and it's going the other way and continues to go the other way now. So how do you think of yourself as one going into the field to harvest? Do you ever think of yourself as going out there to harvest the fields?
No.
No?
Well, through all wood ministry, I feel like I've got enough knowledge to be dangerous, but also to give people that we take wood to an idea of what else they might be eligible for that they never realized. We referred house repairs to Habitat for Humanity and had
Well-
some houses repaired because they did not know who to contact to get a roof repaired, to get an access ramp for wheelchair bound, to get electrical work. A couple of little old ladies burnt wood all summer long to cook on a cook stove.
I'd
I
say
got
it's-
them an electric stove through Christian Ministries, and
I-
they wired the house for
I
them.
think it's even more basic than that, Roger. I think it's the fact that you come as an ambassador of not just Jesus Christ, but as Main Street United Methodist Church.
Right.
And you don't make any apologies for that, I know.
No, but people, once you make that contact and they know you got compassion in your heart to help them to try to save money, buy food, pay for medical bills and all, they kind of trust your knowledge. And I've had people call me up, I trust you, say, who can take down a dead tree for me? Who can do this type of repair work? Who can I take a child to? Do you know a good doctor or referral to? And I'm getting all kinds of calls like that every now and then. And, you know, it's a little bit of extra knowledge, and through compassion, you kind of store that in your head, and people trust you to give them a good answer. or
But they
referral.
also know that you are a member of a church that is a giving
Yeah.
church.
One of the things that has amazed me in the Food for Kids ministry, because of the separation of church and state, we're not permitted to put hardly anything in the food bags in a way of religious tracts or anything. We've had some churches that have refused to participate with us because we won't do that, not recognizing that it's not that we won't do that, it's we can't do that.
And you can't send kits overseas with anything dealing with religion in it.
But the thank you notes that we get back occasionally from the children in the schools, they make that connection. I don't know whether it's through the fact that they ask where does this food come from and somebody tells them, or where they're hearing it. But they understand that it is the churches in their community that is providing that food bag that they're taking home. Now, like I said, I don't know how they make that connection, but they're making it. And that's part of the harvest. And I know that each one of you are involved in some aspect of the way that you go about living your life. And the fact that you do so as a follower of Christ makes you a worker in the field.
But that's the point. You have to get out in the field to make the contact. Those people are not coming to you. You have to go out and make
Well,
yourself known and
and-
make your contact and break the ice.
Unless you're a hermit holed up in your house, you're making contacts.
Yeah, one way or another.
Yeah. Well, I'm interested in this whole series. I've looked ahead at the other themes that come along the way. The last one, I believe, is deals with including all the children, and I'm most interested in seeing how that plays out. We have something special, and I'm not going to say anything more about that, but we have something special in the works for that particular Sunday there.
And you start out with the herald for the kings and all. We used to have that in the early days called a town crier. Would go around and broadcast news headlines on the street corners before the newspapers come out, and extra stuff like that.
In one of my appointments, I could not figure out how, for a long time, how information was being disseminated in the community. And I don't remember how I stumbled onto this, but there was a hairdresser in the community that many of the ladies in the congregation frequented. And it was through that hub there that information was being circulated, both the good and the bad.
Well, when I was growing up, you either went to the barber shop or the hairdresser to find out anything.
One
A
thing-
local drugstore to get your malt and sit there and listen to everybody else talk.
Yeah, well, the one thing we need to remember as followers of Christ, as members of congregation, is that we live in a glass house. There's no hiding inside.
Yep.
Well, I look forward to having you with us in worship later on this morning, and may God's blessings be upon you.